When June comes around each year, we have an instant thought of weddings. June has been labeled the wedding month of the year. What is the one thing we think of in June and weddings? Brides in layers and layers of white. Has this always been the case with weddings and brides? No. The thought of white wedding gowns is attributed to Queen Victoria. She selected a white as the color of her wedding gown. Although the royal vaults revealed that her gown was truly a champagne color, thus it sometimes appears off-white and to others a pale pink. Still, there were no cameras to take a photo of this day revealing the wedding. The painting that is referred to as the royal wedding between Albert and Queen Victoria was actually from a royal event years later. The painting is referred to by most people as her wedding portrait. Even to this day, we give credit to Queen Victoria for creating the Western world belief that a bride is to wear white. We have continued to follow this tradition today by many brides. For most of history, brides rarely purchased a dress specifically for their wedding day. The bride would typically wear her finest dress to the ceremony. Most colors were accepted for the wedding, including black. The color to avoid was green. Green was considered unlucky. Blue was and is still the color of choice for most brides of a non-traditional wedding dress. The Great Depression was a time when the white dress grew scarce. Not until the marriage of Grace Kelly did the white dress return again. The Western world is known for a bride to wear white. In the Eastern world, the tradition of wearing red is still the color of choice. There has been a spin on this the last few years, with the Eastern brides dressing in white to have wedding photos taken, but still returning to their true color of red for their wedding day. Those who could afford it, weddings were elaborate and expensive celebration. In fact, throughout history, the wealthy usually spent more money on their wedding than on christening and burials. In 1552, one German bride spent over 200 galleons on her wedding clothes and her presents, a sum that significantly exceeds the amount of several laborers would earn over a course of a year. Was Queen Victoria the first royal to wear white? No, several royals through history have been noted to have worn a white dress on their wedding day. The earliest record of white wedding dress was the Princess Philippa and her wedding to the Scandinavian king. In 1558, Queen Mary of Scots wore white during her wedding to the soon-be King of France. She wore white despite the fact it was the color of mourning for French noble. White was used, but by no means just for royal weddings. In 1816, Princess Charlotte wore metallic silver when she married Prince Leopold. The white as selected a color did not catch on with the public, since white was impossible to keep clean. In 1846, Elizabeth Barrett, a pretty Kentucky girl, married her wealthy husband. She wore a changeable silk that shimmered from gold to blue, a white bonnet with a big white bow tied under her pretty chin. Unlike Victoria, who married 6 years earlier in white. 1885, Laura Ingalls Wilder wore a black cashmere dress. Wilder was typical of the brides of the period in wearing the colored dress as it was more practical. Was the bridal gown worn more than once, or was it put into storage for future use by a daughter or another family member? No, bride gowns were repurposed to a gown that could be worn for future events. Not only was this correct for the public, but Queen Victoria did repurpose her gown to be used for other formal functions. The lace and veil were removed and used on different outfits for royal functions. Saving gowns did not catch on until photography and the Industrial Revolution. During the 1920s, wedding gowns became shorter and mass-consumed culture emerged. All classes of brides began to wear white. The Depression and the war led many women to revert to the practicality and the inexpensive custom of their grandmothers simply wearing a good dress on their wedding day. After World War II, prosperity and the desire to return to norm, a bride in wedding industry occurred with the return of the GIs. The Brides magazine was founded in 1959, and David's Bridal opened in 1950. These two businesses pushed the unique and distinct that a bridal dress was to be worn only once. Now let's think about a few facts about the influence of why June for a popular month for weddings. Of course, there is the popular 1954 musical, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, and the women sang June Brides. Then there is the old saying, when you marry in June, you're a bride all your life. And then the bridegroom who marries in June gets a sweetheart for life. Betty Davis starred in a movie called June Bride, which also makes a connection between the month of June and weddings. Summer is a great time for weddings because you don't have to worry about bad weather. The fields have been planted, flowers are in bloom, and industries find it easier to give vacation in the summer months. There is also the fact that June is named after the Roman goddess Juno, who is the goddess of marriage and divine protectress of women. She is associated with fertility and love. People who marry in June are thought to be blessed with prosperity and happiness throughout the relationship. It was considered unlucky to marry in May because it was the feast of the dead. In ancient and medieval times, spring was the best time to be married because if a bride got pregnant, the birth would not interfere with the harvest the coming fall. Women couldn't be recovering from pregnancy during harvest time because they were needed to oversee preserving the bounty of the land. If she conceived in June or July, she would be able to help with the current harvest and then in turn be able to help with the harvest the following year. Also, a person's annual bath would occur in late May or early June. Brides probably still smell good for a June wedding, but just in case, they would carry a bouquet of flowers to meet their spouse at the altar. Some interesting facts that were taken from a survey in 2022. From 12,000 couples, 43% of the weddings took place between September and November. October was the most popular month to get married in 2022, accounting for 20% of the marriages for that year. Approximately 10.8% of the couples got married in the month of June, 10.2 in August, 9.8 in May, and 9.7 in July. If you really want to stand out from the crowd, then get married in the least popular month, which is January, with just 4.7% getting married. The wedding veil was introduced because they believed that the evil spirits preyed on the brides in ancient time as they walked down the aisle. So to deter the bride wore a veil to hide her identity. Wedding historian Susan Wagner broadens the perspective to say that the veil repels anything that may make the bride unhappy or cause harm. And the bouquet symbolizes they carry the bouquet because flowers have been a key part of a bride's look since ancient Roman times, who carried and wore floral garland to their nuptials as a symbol of fertility and new beginnings. Now we're going to look at a few. What you've seen before were bride and grooms as paired, that represents the June bride. Now we're going to look at Fred's ladies in bridal costumes. These are not original. These are costumes that I created to fit the years and the theme for this program originally. Growing up in the 60s, every girl wanted to be a June bride, and every girl seemed to have a bride doll in her collection with Barbies, or all my cousins did. So that's why I guess I think more of June as a bridal month. This is the early brew and it is on a wooden body, and you see she's representing her time era in a costume of 1870. She's about 13 and a half inches tall. This is a wooden body fashion that's 15 and a half inches tall, and she's one of my favorite dolls and my very first wooden body doll, and she's got lovely bisque arms. And this is a costume from the book Victoria of Denise, starts with a B, from over in California. This is my interpretation of a bride from 1860s. I used the big hat as it was talked about with a big bow tied under her chin. This is a Barquois doll, and in this photo. This is a 15-inch portrait, not a portrait, Gemot, just a Gemot. This dress is copied out of a book, French Fashions, by, it'll come to me in a minute. Can't think, but her dress is of 1870s. Countess Maria Chernovsky. This doll, I cannot pronounce the maker's name, but this is like a 1910 dress on a 1910 doll that is made by the Belgium company. This company made this head in 3 sizes, and they did not put the dolls on bodies. These were only heads sold. So you will find them on all kinds of bodies. Out of the 3 sizes, this is the middle size. I have the large one, but I do not have the smallest one. This one is 19 inches tall. The largest one is 21 inches tall, and the small is 16. This is another Gemot bride on a wooden body with the silk dress of the 1880s. The 1880s had the bustle effect in the back. After the turn of the 1900s, the Kessner 162 bride is of the same time period as the Kessner Gibson girl. So they are compo body, open mouth, kind of the dolly face doll. This is a long face portrait Gemot. It is a reproduction of the same dress that you saw earlier on the 16-inch doll. This is on a 22-inch doll, and I love this long face portrait doll. It's one of my favorite dolls in my collection. Not only I have several of the reproduction, but I do have an antique version of this. This is a portrait Jameau of 1870s, a beautiful doll that comes on the wooden body. She's 22 inches tall. Again, this is another wedding gown on that first French fashion wooden body doll. That's a Jameau that I told you about. I took a different approach with this wedding gown. This gown, the original I saw at convention one year in a glass case and took a photo of it and had to make it. And this is a reproduction doiliac that is on the doll parts body. And I wanted you to see that this dress was the same dress in the photo before. The dolls are the same size. The 15.5-inch antique doll from the 1870s and the doll parts new dolls are interchangeable with clothes. So it's a great example of antiques to modern. Can't see the face on this one. That little bar is covering it up, but I do believe this is the same doll in yet the third wedding dress that I made for the 15.5-inch doll. Yes, it is. This is a smiling brew. This is the smallest smiler brew. She is 10.5 inches tall. This doll was the companion doll that I used as an RD who traveled with me, and she had costumes for every event we attended. I made her a different costume, and when I gave this program, a bridal program, I made her this costume to go to that bridal program for a club meeting. Now, brides for enjoyment. These are brides, as like I said earlier, I just pulled these from Pinterest, and you're going to see some antique versions that are in their original gowns that were produced for them in early years. Some of them I think are replacements from a later time, but I just thought you would like to see a lot of different bridal costumes. So we have 3 different dolls represented here with 3 different costumes from the area, from about 1870s. Look, I love the portrayal of the orange blossoms floating across the doll at my extreme right. I just think it's a gorgeous costume. These are 3 different costumes. Again, you will see we've got 3 different time elements here. The first one looks to my left, looks like an 1860s. Then you go to the 1880s or late 1870s with the slimmer line where everything's thrown to the back. The bustle is diminished in this one because the way they fitted the gowns tight, but then the bustle did return in the 1880s to the one at the end with the heavy lace on the dress. The first one is a reproduction Alice Leverett doll in a bridal costume made in one of her workshops, and this is the same bridal gown that was in Maria Tarnowski's book. The middle one is another version of the long-faced Jameau. Wrong, that's a Dehor fashion doll in her bridal costume with those extremely elongated arms. And the last one there is a misfit. She is a modern bride and dressed kind of semi like a Gibson girl. And I'm not sure why she's on this slide, but there she is. So we'll move on. I like the first 2 on this to my left is showing you the same costume at different angles so you can see kind of how the costume looks with more of both angle sides. The last one looks to be a Jameau, leather body Jameau in an 1860s. And I do believe this costume is probably a remade costume using old lace which is absolutely gorgeous. Then we have the Kestner, or it could be 1159 or a Kestner bride here, the 162 or the 1159 in the 1910 look. I believe that's the 1159. And then the other one is an 1860s costume. This one, I wanted you to see all elements of this dress. This, you notice on this one, we're talking the 1870s. The dress is flatter in the front and everything thrown to the back for all the fullness to be in the back. So this is the look without the huge bustles in the back, but still has that train effect. Suit, popular suits for the day, and this would be 1880s with the large bustle in the back. Again, another version of the 1880s. I kind of feel this one, I vacillate back and forth whether it's a remade gown or it's an old gown. It's got exquisite lace on it all the way through. Everywhere you look, it's got exquisite lace. So it's old lace, but I don't know if it's new or old without, I would have to have it a close-up look. This one is another example of the 1860s look. The bustle is not there. The dress is thrown to the back. So this is late 1860s. And look at those layers and layers and layers of tulle, just like what we want to think with a wedding gown. And then you can see that the netting on top of it all has little specks in it. So, and that was very common in 1860. And Empress Yuina loved to wear dresses of this style. We have two different versions here of the 1880s, showing you gorgeous lace, the detail, the pleating, everything on both of these dolls is gorgeous, and the veils there. Again, I believe this is a newly made costume, but again, it shows that 1870 on a smiling brew, the fitted, how it fits very, it's smaller. It's not all that frou-frou and fullness, but yet still a lovely gown. Again, the same dress, the front and the back for a wedding gown. Look at the front of that dress with all that self-trim work on it. And then it follows around the whole bottom of the dress. Gorgeous self-trimming on that. Again, lots of pleats showing the front and the back of the same dress, the old lace on top. Another version of a gown front and back, so you can see the front. You know, when the bride comes in down the altar, you see the front, and as she passes by, you get to see the back. So I thought you would enjoy seeing both versions of it. Again, in 1870s, showing the front and the back of the dress. 1880s, look at the gathering up in the tulle and the lace that was used on this gown. Quite lovely, with the front being very elaborate on this gown. Another version of the 1860s, the flatter front, fuller back, and look at all of the handwork that has been done on this with piping and soutache. Just a gorgeous gown, and carrying a beautiful bouquet of orange blossoms. So surely she had just not taken her yearly bath, because those flowers would be so fragrant in orange blossoms. Different version of the same dress of the 1870s, showing again the flatter front fitting more tight form, no big bustle. Two different gowns here of the 1870s, 1860s look. At the 1860s and 1870s, the early part, it was flat front with everything thrown to the back. This is pre-bustle. The bustle comes along a little later. You have about 1910 on your left, that German bride, and then on the right looks like an FG or a Jameau fashion of the 1880s. Portrait Jameau, both two different dresses by a well-known pattern designer for dolls. And I put those in here because of the bridal attire is still very important to doll collectors. These two dress patterns were made in the last 5 years. Love this dress where it shows the sweeping of the back and it just shows the perfect bride pose there. Now let's look at vintage to modern. These are dolls that you probably know from childhood or know cousins or someone that had these dolls. The first doll on the right, my cousin had this doll. Her doll's name was Roberta. Or Roberta, she called it Roberta. These were tall dolls, maybe like 30 inches. These dolls were sold in grocery stores in the time period of the early 60s era. The left is a Madame Alexander, more modern Madame Alexander. This is another Madame Alexander, the capo version. Madame Alexander. Madame Alexander dolls' costumes, to me, are always superb with their detail and their fitting and everything. Her gowns just always send me in a little orbit. I just think they're wonderful. We have a Sissy on one side, and I don't know the doll, but it's a compo, and I believe it is a Madame Alexander, but I'm not 100% sure on all the compo versions. Some of you will have more knowledge than I do. Again, more modern dolls. Sissy on my left. I don't know the doll on the right, but I thought she had a pretty costume that you would enjoy from trip down memory lane of your childhood. Two different sissies and two different style of gowns that Madame Alexander did as brides. These are your 50s and 60s when every little girl wanted a bride doll and to be a bride in the month of June. And then we have Barbie. Barbie cannot be left out of any group. Barbie has been a fashion icon since day one, including a bride to remember. So these are two different costumes of bride dolls for Barbie. And then we will wind this down with Tonner's versions of brides that he has done several through the ages with his dolls, and they're always, like Madame Alexander's, costumes are extremely elaborate and beautiful. The workmanship and the design that he puts into them. And that is our bridal program for tonight, our June bride on this Tuesday evening. We don't know if the tradition of June brides will be continued as the most popular month of the year. And we do not know that white will prevail from now on. Who knows? We may want the color of red as a popular color for a wedding dress. I do know this past weekend, a lady said that her niece was getting married and it was an all black and white wedding. So we do not know what our colors will be, but I hope you enjoyed this.